So let me start by sharing a bit of context to the topic. And really, the context to the topic for today is it is a VUCA world, and it is a world in which the external environment is highly volatile and continues to be so. And additionally, we are seeing that the customer requirements are becoming more and more demanding. Now, the question in front of us really is, as CFOs, how can we stay ahead of this disruption and deliver strong customer experience, operational efficiencies, optimize the business strategy, and also manage the remote workforce? So that is the real challenge for us as CFOs. And my sense is this VUCA world requires a VUCA response, which is a strong vision of how do we want to take the business and the function ahead. And at the same time, the U would stand for undaunted responses, because it will require us to take some tough calls in response to the situation as it evolves. Mr. Giridhar rightly put it, there is no scenario building you can do for when there is no revenue. We need to be prepared for scenarios such as this, because gray swan events such as COVID, the evolving nature of the business, and the volatility we are seeing around us is only going to increase as we go along. So how do we be prepared will require us to be undaunted in our responses as we go along. And also, one of the panelists rightfully mentioned, there is an element of being compassionate. And we need to consider that the entire ecosystem around us has seen a big jolt. And we need to consider how can we be more compassionate, recognize the health, safety, well-being concerns of others around us. And digital can play a big role in that. And the last element of it is the A, which stands for agile. And that's what this panel will really look to elaborate on. How can we build agile finance functions and agile business models, which can be more adaptive to the situations as they evolve? And I'll just share a visual to get that across a little bit more clearly. So this is what it means to say a no to digital. No thanks, are we too busy? And I'm just bringing that up on the screen now to share that we have an option to say, are we too busy to automate when we've got so many options to automate, which is AI, RPA, ML, IoT, big data, cloud edge computing, chatbots, everything is around us. But can we grab the opportunity or put it under the carpet and say, no, we're too busy with all the things that are in there in front of us? And this panel will then go on to debate about what do we need to do as a finance function to really leverage the automation opportunity in front of us. And again, the key questions in front of us is, do we think finance will be botified? We've heard quite a few of the other speakers elaborate on that bit earlier. It'll be really interesting to hear from the panel, do we think we're going to be botified? The second thing really to debate about is, do we really understand the pace of the change? Because the last 1 year has really challenged us in terms of, do we really understand what's happening around us? And the evolution of technology, globalization, and COVID-19 and the pace at which it has evolved really forces us to rethink, do we understand what really needs to happen in the future? And the last one is, are we as finance skills ready to handle the evolution as we go from an accounting and a reporting focused function into a more strategic partner, as Mr. Parthasarathi rightly put it, driving the business strategy up front, and also into a more data-driven ecosystem, as the previous panel commented on. So with that context, I'll just get on straight into it. So Anand, the first question is for you. What is the trends we've seen of finance automation in the previous 5 years? And do you think finance will be botified in the next 5 years?
Thank you, Ajay. I think it's a very, very interesting question. And it's a very nice way to put botified. I can't imagine a world without bots today, without robots tomorrow. But definitely, I'm not an expert on this in terms of technology. And I've been listening to some of the speakers before me in different panels. But I would definitely want to give a slightly different perspective. I think for me, the question is really, what is the evolution phase for a finance function, and how does evolution play a role? And let me actually go back in history to a little bit to relate to the context and possibly, arrive at a plausible way forward. If I look at how the world has evolved in the last 300 odd years, and how finance function in that period has also evolved. The first industrial revolution took place almost 200 years back and used water and steam to mechanize production. And that entire process took almost 100 years to stabilize and get adopted. The second revolution, which used electricity for mass production, took almost 40-50 years to get mass adopted. And the third revolution, which was led by computers in the 60s and the 70s, the widespread computerization took almost 10 to 20 years only. Now, the fourth revolution that we are talking about today is the digital revolution, where we are talking about universal mobile internet, IoT, AI, bots, and what we call as the digital revolution. And this has been in the forefront for the last 10 years at least. Now, the important point to note in all these stages has been that the time taken to evolve from one form of automation to the next and more evolved form has been reducing progressively. And the impact of adoption has been gaining, speed much, much more. The second and more important learning from this 200 years of anecdotal data is that companies and functions which led the adoption of change were not just able to survive, but also able to outgrow considerably, their peers and competitors. Now, given this backdrop, I think the question for us really to ponder is not really whether the finance function will be bodified, but the real question is how soon and by who all. So I have no doubt in my mind that we are all have to be bodified, but the real question is, what are the streams that we really want to adopt today? What are the areas where we feel we have a strong leverage over, let's say, some of our other peers or competitors? And how soon can we do this? It is not just a question of 5 years. It is more a question of here and now versus tomorrow and then. Whether it is adoption of bots or using algorithms to increase efficiency, or using big data for analytics or audit, or replacing subjectivity with objectivity, data is everywhere, and data is the new oil. If we are not drilling this new oil, someone else will. So in my view, this is a foregone conclusion. And as they say in the startup world, disrupt or be disrupted. Similarly, as a finance professional, if we are not changing and evolving with the times, we are bound to get this, negatively disrupted.
Thanks, Anand. Disrupt or be disrupted. I think that's a really wonderful way to put it. And with that, I'll go next to Tanisha to understand how, Tanisha, do you think we can leverage technology to automate? Because now, as Anand is saying, it is a foregone conclusion. How do you think we can leverage technology?
So I think I'll pick on from where Anand has left. So along with the way the businesses have evolved over a period in the last few years or few decades and centuries, is similarly how finance has evolved, right? We were a very, I would say, accounting-based and reporting-based function. And historically, even as much as like 20 or 30 years ago, the large time spent and effort spent was in accounting and reporting. Almost 70% would be spent there, and very little, 20 to 25% would be spent on strategic partnering or business partnering. Now, the expectation from the finance function itself has changed. There is a larger involvement of finance in the business, and hence, we need to be where the business is. We need to be where the data and information is. Right. So there is a huge potential for automation. Now, if you look at automation, there are two views which you could take. One is a bottom-up view, which is to say, what are my pain areas? Where do I today face a lot of difficulties? Today my teams are spending a lot of time doing it. Or you could also look at where are the gaps? Where are the blind spots for the business? Where is it that I don't have those kind of information which are required? So this is still a very bottom-up approach to say where all can automation really help you. contrary to that, if you take a bigger picture view to it, you should actually look at what are the bigger challenges today the business is facing, and what and where can data be really useful. And by data, I mean it's not just raw data; it's readable, usable data, and that's where I think finance can be handy. Because historically, if you say whenever there was a business problem, let's say you got a new launch, you got a huge hit somewhere, people will approach the finance team to say, now tell us what to do. But now it's not so. Finance is more and more proactive. We are supposed to be the ones to show business there could be a problem here. We have to be the eyes and ears of the business, and that's where the expectation also goes up, right? So I think if we take automation from a bigger picture and say that today if the business is here and we need to evolve there, let's say in the next 3 years or 5 years, which are the areas where I really need to automate so that I get the information to make the right decisions, right? And that's where I think finance can leverage technology, leverage automation to a large extent.
Thanks, Tanisha. Wonderful response. And then let me now go over to Vijay to understand what do you think, Vijay, are the key challenges for going ahead with the automation?
Hey, hi. So thank you for the question. I think the biggest challenge to start with is to answer a few important questions, and then finding answers to these questions is very important. So, for example, while automation becomes an important piece, the questions could be where to start. What process needs to be automated, why automation is required, entire roadmap, expected output, the data security concerns, future of legacy, people, loss of job, investment, what would be the ROI, the bottom line impact, ever-changing technology development, and identifying the correct tools. So what is important is that, finding answers to these questions, to exactly come to know what would be the, pain points while the finance automation process is underway. So let me elaborate this a little more. For some organization, the first challenge is simply knowing where to begin. The theory is good, but every company is burdened with its own people, processes, system, and it's hard to push the legacy. Trust me, we have faced a similar kind of situations in the past. So addressing the governance questions will be important, but finance will also need to be prepared to experiment, to spend some time understanding where the intelligent automation tools are most easily integrated into their organization in order to begin building the wider business case. Quick wins will provide the base for an incremental change process for sure. It may simply be a question of identifying an existing problem that organization already acknowledges and looking at how intelligent automation might deliver improvements. So, as an implementation progresses, the challenges may become more pressing. How do we get the maturity chain, incorporating more robots in our workforce, and managing our cyber security exposure? So all this needs to be, having a more data quality in order to make good use of emerging technologies. What starts out as a POC, which is proof of concept, will need to be developed into a scalable solution. More broadly, the value of freeing up the resource, by applying robotic tools to manual process will not be realized unless finance is able to use those resources effectively. To be honest, our accountants right now don't have the skill to control the process. We have got to move them from an exception-based work rather than a repetitive work. So moreover, I feel that the intelligent automation offers a route to new ways of working that is iterative rather than a big bang. Unlike previous wave of transformation which happened, it does not require finance to make a large scale investment in IT or to replace a legacy technology with more modern system. Instead, business will move forward with series of small projects and experiment, stitching together best of the breeds of tools and technologies to offer constantly evolving services and processes that deliver even more.
Thanks for that. And with that, I'll go over now to Ramit to understand what is the practical advice you would give to somebody who is wanting to start out on the journey. Because as Vijay rightly said, there is great potential, but there is equally quite a few challenges. So what is the practical advice, Ramit, that somebody should consider while they go about the?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me over. Am I audible well? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So a great question. So first of all, I whenever I interact with my clients, right, I always compliment the finance team, finance fraternity. They have always been at the forefront of technology. I mean, it's not the other way around. It's not that technology is catching up at finance departments now. The reason why ERP is such a successful program around the world is because the finance leaders wanted an ERP to have better control of the financial ledger, right? So without that support and initiative, nothing would have happened. What is now happening is there's a next wave of efficiencies coming in. So it's all about, if you ask me the one advice, it's all about having a perspective change. It's not about a fear, right? We need to approach this with a lot of optimism and positivity. It's not about job losses. It's not about issues in general about whether it will work or not. Automation works, right? I mean, it's been around for 10 years, 15 years. Technology has been there. Of course, it matures every 6 months. There's a next version which will come, and things around that. So plan for scale. Okay, never plan for a POC and then see what will I do with that. The second is we need to have a team which is carved out to drive automation and new ways of working. As I think some of my co-panelists have very clearly said, automation is a new way of working. So imagine if you get your an existing finance leader to drive automation. We need fresh thinking, we need fresh blood, we need to, it's like a like a VC team which is being put aside internally, which is constantly challenging the status quo, right? And support them with some, they can fail, right? I mean, you need to allow them to fail. So if you are able to create that kind of a environment, ensure the people are not fearing what will happen with automation, right? They should be receptive about it. I think this works. Second thing is automation, unlike some of the earlier IT projects, right? It's a lot of hard work, right? I mean, we start with a few use cases. You'll realize that, the data is not flowing in. There's a connector issue. And the previous keynote speaker talked a lot about that, right? You have those issues and they need day in and day out, experts to drive it. So leverage partner ecosystem, leverage people who can do it very well for you and drive scale. So coming back to you, Ajay, my single piece advice is look forward to it, change the management perspective, and rely on carving out a team which is either your own internal innovation team or a partner who can drive it very well for you.
Sure. Thanks, Ramit, and that was wonderful advice. And let me go back to then Anand, just to understand how has COVID impacted your business, and Anand, if you could share as to how does that kick-started the transformation journey from a digital standpoint?
I come from a retail background, so I work for a retail company, and while COVID has been challenging enough for almost all sectors, but I must say that because of the lockdown and because of the surrounding implications, I think a couple of sectors were the hardest hit, and retail was one of them. As Ajay, you rightly said, COVID was a gray swan event, and we knew about the implications almost 1 or 2 months before, but we really started working or actioning around just post when the lockdowns got announced. The situation for any company, and I would say retail in particular, and definitely us also, was definitely extremely challenging. The biggest challenge was that you have a large amount of inventory, you have a large number of workforce, and you have to you have liquidity issues, you have operational issues, and you have a very distributed workforce across the country. Now, how you are able to manage all of that, and I think that is when you realize the importance of some of these tools which technology really provides you. You've always wanted them, you always used them, but never to that scale and that maturity level that a pandemic like of situation allows you or forces you to use. Now, in any such kind of a situation, there are biggest two issues that one faces. One is around liquidity, how you conserve cash and how do you manage your liquidity going forward, because you really don't know how and when the situation is going to get better. And second big problem is always around people, taking care of your team, vendors, partners, and how to sustain the crisis, because they are the biggest asset that you have. Your ecosystem is the most valuable part, without which you really cannot sustain any future operations. Now, tackling both these issues require a very different kind of mindset. But I must admit, in times like these, apart from the normal mindset of a finance professional of conserving expenses, taking care of people, it is technology which has significantly solved for the physical gap for the execution of thought and strategy. Whether it is supply chain tools, whether it is AI based tools. I think if I were to give my specific example of the company that I work with, we were able to simulate inventory positions, liquidity positions for the forward months of the lockdown, if the lockdown continued or was lifted, and therefore take the right decisions on right sizing of working capital, right sizing of capital deployment, and therefore manage our liquidity quite efficiently. The end result was that we were able to reduce our working capital deployment by over 40% in the first 2 quarters. And I can tell you, for a retail operation, it is a significant amount of money. Apart from this, I think technology again helped significantly in the entire lockdown period by being facilitating remote working and even managing our ERP remotely. With a lot of SaaS-based review tools, we were even able to assist and get the quarterly audits done. Being a listed entity, we need to get our quarterly numbers audited and reported in time. And with technology, we were able to do that with a lot of ease. Again, going back to the bottification part and the usage of RPA, I think a lot of work got done in an auto mode without even getting people to the office, and that significantly changed the scales in our favor. And I think early adoption of some of these programs and some of these technologies in the ecosystem significantly helped in the way the business was able to run, and not just run, but be prepared for the future in a very seamless manner. I would say that going forward also, with the implementation of RPA and more forecasting softwares, we are looking forward to take these learnings that we have had from COVID to the next level by mass basing the bot program to cover even non-critical functions like inventory planning and cash flow management, etc. But I must say one thing is for sure: finance function with these new technologies is not going to remain the same. Automation has disrupted the way we work, and it has disrupted for the better. Even specialized tasks like treasury management are now possible with far better accuracy, yield management, and we are in the forefront trying to leverage some of these opportunities. Technology has also enabled transformation of the finance function in general. If I look at a very general kind of a situation, from the advent of the BPO, which started with a labor arbitrage, to labor automation using bots, to the next level of intelligent automation, using AI and ML. I think our journey of finance transformation has just begun, and I'm sure this is not the end. Just with AI or ML, probably we will move towards achievement of super intelligence and singularity at some level. But I think it is a journey which has just begun.
No, thanks for that. It's a journey that's just begun. I think I totally agree with that. And it's a journey that has been kickstarted quite a bit with the pandemic continuing as it is. And maybe Tanisha, just to understand, you also mentioned that in your examples, you mentioned finance can play a big part in partnering the business. Can you elaborate how technology is helping the business itself capture additional growth opportunities in the cosmetics industry, and what's the sort of role that finance can play in that context?
Sure. Thanks, Ajay, for the question. And if I were to elaborate a little more on that, there are many examples where, during the pandemic, when suddenly the business was disrupted, and it was unprecedented times, very difficult to build predictive models. But there are many such examples. Probably I can talk about two areas where automation has really helped business and finance both. Okay, so let's say during the pandemic, and you know how it was in India, unlike in most other countries where the entire country went under a lockdown, in India the lockdown was like a red, amber, green. Different cities, and even within cities, the containment zones were different. So it was very difficult to predict what would be your sales, when would it open, how would you go about doing it, right? And as you said, there is no sales, there's rest of it is all zero, right? And that's why the whole effort was first to say, how do you predict, and how do you get visibility on a daily basis as to which containment zone, which city, what's happening in which state, and how do you help your teams there? How do you ensure wherever there is, it's a green zone? How do you ensure your stocks are there? How do you ensure sales happens, right? And over there, I think we already had a Salesforce automation, so we had all our beats and route plans already mapped. But it was on a very different system. So we had to get it into a common system, make it available to the top management so that we are able to see those data points on a daily basis and have those red, amber, greens marked out. So that really helped us quickly stand up on our feet to understand, okay, now the ways of working has changed suddenly. And this is how we go about looking at business on a daily basis. So that's one example. But if I were to talk of another example, which is very specific to the division where I am in, which is the salon business, the salon industry, so salons were not the first priority to open up, right? In fact, in many cities and states, even after they were out of red and amber, by the time the salons opened and it was allowed to open, it was almost July or August. So practically, it meant almost zero sales for 5 months, right? And you can imagine if you were the CFO, you have to save jobs, you have to ensure your inventory is at the bare minimum with the liquidity and the cash flow issues, right? And historically, we were a pure breed model, which is, we would only sell to the salons and the salons would sell it further to the consumers, right? So we had to quickly stand up. There's a saying, the pace of change will never be so fast, and it was never so slow again, right? In that sense, it is very true because what the division never did in the last 20 odd years of being in India, being in operations, we had to quickly do in almost 2 months. We developed a social commerce model. Now we are working on e-commerce actively rather than being the laggards. We are actively pursuing these alternate channels, alternate models, and it was not easy because people had to develop these models sitting at home, figuring out how do you do social commerce, how do you ensure your sales happen wherever it is possible, and how do you equip your teams to say, you will have the stocks, go take the order, it will be serviced. Tie back with supply chain, tie back with all the other back-end services in the company, and ensure business is moving, right? So I think these were the two examples which I could clearly mention, and then there are many more. And finance is at the forefront of all this, also because we are the function which can see the end-to-end of the business sitting in one place, right? There are functions, let's say sales, marketing, supply chain, they have visibility to only one area. Finance is the function which has visibility to end-to-end business, what's happening, what repercussions one action has on every other aspect of the business, right? And that's where I would say the CEOs or many other business leaders look up to us, saying why finance should be leading these kind of efforts and automations.
Yeah, thanks, Tanisha. And as you rightly mentioned, the pace of change is not going to slow down for sure. And let me understand, Ramit, from your perspective, in the context of that, what role can technology play in helping the business and finance based on your experience? How are you seeing that?
So, as I did say, technology and finance has been there for the last couple of decades already with the ERP being there. And then things are only getting interesting now. And going back to, I think what Anand, you mentioned about BPO industry, something which we, suddenly learned with COVID-19 hitting us, right? I mean, the BPO business, which IBM, we have some 20,000 practitioners, including doing F&A operations for clients. Nobody plans for COVID-19, right? None of a BCP, could hold true. So what we had to do was, move, and then in our business, right, we had to work from office because of the client sensitive data and things around that. So we are fairly proud of the fact that we migrated work within a span of 10 days, work from home, and actually in the peak of, in 1 week, in the last week of March, and there was zero depreciation in service levels for our clients around the world, right? So what that taught us is, we have to begin to plan for resiliency. And that's where, to your point, there are a fair bit of tools which we are now beginning to use. The way we monitor our workforce, the way we, ensure the queue management across multiple projects, attendance management, ensuring data security, privacy. Those are increasingly becoming, even more important. We are now planning not for working from office, one office. We are now planning to work from maybe thousands of offices, right? So the work from home is nothing but work from office. And as we speak today, still, we are still in the lockdown situation. We are still working from home as we speak. So those are some interesting things which have really happened for us. What we are, leveraging extensively, and some of the points we talked about is how those technologies fit together. See, at the end of the day, we believe that the pathway forward is leveraging intelligent workflows, right? I heard co-panelists talking about intelligent automation. We actually extend that conversation in intelligent workflow. So we look at an end-to-end cycle, right? So the organizations are now increasingly becoming platforms, right? So you have vendor on one side, and he delivers a good to you, it's received, and the payments are done. So then that P2P becomes one platform. Likewise, your record to report, likewise your order to cash, right? So finance function theoretically, are 3 different towers or 3 different platforms. So how do you integrate all these moving parts? There are systems, subsystems, there are data pools, and we talked about that, the connectors there. And you will choose to have multiple automation tools, right? You may use Automation Anywhere, you may use Blue Prism, you may have your own homegrown Excel macro. How does that all stitch together? And then, of course, not to talk about the multiple ERPs you may have, right? And maybe legacy systems. So there is a need to create what we call a system of engagement, which is sitting on top of your system of records. Nobody's going to, there's no need to, look at integrating or having one instance of ERP and then starting your journey. It will be too late by then, right? So as I did say, always plan for the scaled up model, but that's the way we look at it, which is intelligent workflow, which is, liberally sprinkled with exponential technologies. And you have the ability to plug out and plug in a new algo, right? Which suddenly you think is more relevant to your business. So that's the pathway forward from an IBM lens. And that's what we are using extensively, not only in our own business, because as you would know, IBM is a fairly large, has its own captive shared service. We started the journey around 25 years back. And we do this for our clients at scale. So that's what we are looking at, really.
Okay. And I think it's Ramit's screen.
But anyway, Anand, we are not looking at super.
Sorry, your screen was hanging. Just lost it.
Hi. Yeah, okay. So what I'm saying is we are not looking forward to super intelligence in the workers. We are always looking at digital enabled workers, and that percentage is only going to multiply.
No, that's good. And then maybe Vijay, if you could comment, we've got a question from the audience as well. I'll probably roll it into one as a question for you, which is, how do you think we can leverage automation to further the operational efficiency cost-cutting agenda? And is that, Eros now is obviously a tech-enabled business as well. Is that something you've been assessing in your business?
Sure. So, at Eros now, obviously Eros now being an OTT platform, we deal both, B2C and a B2B business, where we sell our product to our customers directly and get a feedback immediately, whether the product is good, bad, what improvements are required. So what happens with us is that data plays a key role over here. You exactly want to know what sales happened at what time during the day, and whether there was any payment failures due to which the consumer couldn't buy the subscription packs. Where was the failure at, whether at the payment gateway portal or it was on our portal. If after the subscription being activated, payments being received, whether the services was given to the customer, there was any default over there, maybe it could be due to server issues. So there are a lot of real time what I call is the emerging risk of an OTT, running an OTT business. And there I believe it is very important to capture correct data in the system, to throw it at real time to the top management to understand the flow of the business. So that is where what I feel is automation will make life easier for finance department, because what's going to get automated is a manual process, a defined process. But what needs to be done with the data is more analytical and more real time. So if you actually see, we do our marketing campaigns to get installs, to get new users. So whether that marketing money that we spend, is it giving us the return that we had expected? If not, then we need to stop that campaign real time. It cannot be, if it is a 15-day campaign and we end up getting data late, we'll not be able to make justice to it, and the money will go waste. So for that not to happen, we need the data to happen real time, to be delivered in the desired format, for making the management take correct decision. This has happened multiple times in the past, where monies just flow and then we don't end up getting the desired results. Similarly is the content spend, similarly is the technology spend. So what I would want to tell people here is that identify what are the manual processes in the department, automate those, and focus more on the strategy and analytical part. So when you talk about my team, I have 85% of my resource working only on data analytics. So only 15%, the team will be focusing on inputting the correct data. But the 85% mind only work towards strategic decisions, analyzing the data, throwing some good inputs about where the business is going and how can we support it.
Now, that's really useful to know. And it's great to know that there is upskilling required to ensure that business is able to absorb the additional finance skill into the other element, which is the business partnering analytics side of it. But coming back to the question, does any of the other panelists also have examples of where this has specifically helped with headcount reduction or cost reduction as manpower in the midst of the pandemic?
So Ajay, if I were to pitch in, I think the specific mandate that I have had is never to look at cost reduction or a headcount reduction, because the way I look at automation is to increase the efficiency and therefore improve the ROI, but not really at the cost of people. Because fortunately for us in a country like India, where the country is also growing at a good growth rate, and as such there is a lot of opportunity that we see all around us. And businesses are also growing at a good, CAGR. Now, therefore, in a growing economy and in a growing business environment, I think we will always need good people, and good technology or good systems can only augment the entire process flow, can only improve how your decision making can get better, can only improve how you can plan your visibility of future sales, future profits, future expenses in a much more agile and a much better way. But frankly, my experience has not been to look at cost reduction or getting rid of headcount as any objective.
Thanks for that, and a refreshing perspective, because I think we're all in the midst of pandemic hits and we've had significant cost pressures. It's refreshing to hear from all of the panelists that we're still in the midst of that, carrying that heart and the compassion at the heart of it, and looking to capture the growth as it comes and keeping our teams motivated through this issues. Just one other point, and I think it was discussed on one of the earlier panels, was how do we view IT security in the midst of the IT tech adoption that we are seeing? And maybe I'll go to Tanisha yourself, if you could comment on your views on how do you see that security aspect of this?
I would say more and more the data security is becoming a key priority for all the CXOs in any organization. Whether you're in a manufacturing setup, service setup, B2B, B2C, everywhere. Data privacy as well as security is a big priority, right? As we speak, the data privacy policy for the country is still being developed. There are many other countries who have already had a very detailed data privacy policy. When you're talking about consumer data, when you're talking about your vendor and customer data, right? But overall, from a data security point of view, there are different models. Either you could place all your data in your own servers, your own clouds, or you could outsource it. And then the whole issue around data breaches and the risk of loss of, security on the data. So, and I think as we speak, people are still grappling the situation. I don't see any organization or any industry which is today, they can claim that, we have figured out the mantra or the code for data security. But yes, this is more and more area where, we are actively seeking guidance, actively looking to collaborate and also figure out how do you ensure data privacy and security.
Thanks, Tanisha, for that. And I'll just add a bit of perspective also from my side in terms of the key themes, what I've heard from this panel, in the interest of time. So a few key things that we really brought on the table. One is, let's have a bold vision of where do we want to take our finance function. And I think that clearly came out as part of the panel discussions, that it is a growing economy at the end of the day. And we need to build a strong vision as to where do we see our finance function in 5-10 years down the line, and have that clarity in terms of how do we build the right skills as part of that organization. And upskilling and making sure that we have the right teams as part of that is a critical element of that strategy. The second is integrate technology as part of that strategy. I think one of the things that clearly came out as part of this panel is there is an imperative for us to integrate technology as part of the business, but also as part of the finance operating model. Because surely business is moving ahead with the right level of technology adoption and the enablement needed in terms of growing the business, managing the operations quite effectively. And the onus is equally on us as finance to make sure that we are partnering the business with this journey, and making sure that we are working hand in glove with making sure that the growth story of that business is. And that requires us to potentially think of our talent differently as well. So maybe there are a little bit more data scientists who come along, or a little bit more technical skilled finance resources who come along, because one of the other panelists also mentioned that even though finance might have great ideas, they might hesitate from sharing those ideas. And it's really important that we get people who are steeped in finance, but are tech savvy, so that they are able to interpret the outcomes of the technology analysis that comes, and are able to leverage that and work with business as business partners. And lastly, I think the key theme that came out of this panel conversation is there's a lot of emphasis on automation, but the right sort of emphasis. It's not from a perspective of let us automate to reduce cost or manpower here and now, but let us automate to make sure that we are able to capture the growth opportunities, and we are able to make the finance operations more efficient, so that we can focus on the more value-added activities which is working with the business and driving the growth and making the business more operationally efficient. So with that, I'll thank all of the panelists. I don't know if I missed some of the points, please feel free to add, but it was a wonderful panel conversation, and thanks all.